Okay, in this video, since I've got back into the 43 Spanish, we're going to talk about forming brass for the 43 Spanish. Now, when I got my first gun, the Argentine rifle, back in 2012, I made a couple videos about reloading. I showed you what was available then, and I did a smokeless load. And what happened is I didn't have the bullets with the Lyman bullet mold. I modified the Lyman bullet for the 43 Mauser and put an oversized bullet in there. And what happened was I was getting extreme high velocities on my chronograph and stopped the whole thing, put up all the stuff, and the brass, the dies, and just put it away. And I haven't touched it since then, until recently, since I acquired another 43 Spanish gun. Actually, it wasn't listed as 43 Spanish. I just bought the rolling block, not knowing the actual caliber until I brought it home and examined it. It wasn't listed as 43 Spanish. It was listed as 4570 or something like that. So I got back into it. So I started doing, I said, let me make a new video on reloading, because that video has been up a while. And it gets a lot of hits because most people don't go into a real sound, in-depth explanation. I've looked around for the 43 Spanish. And also in my research and looking around, I went on to different forums and just did a couple Google searches and looked at the forums at what people were looking for in terms of information and questions they had. And of course it comes down to forming 43 Spanish brass out of something else. Okay, is basically what I found most people are looking for. And since people contact me whenever I put a fresh video up, it could be a year or two afterwards, people will start asking me questions. You know, much like my Carcano series, I get a lot of Carcano questions. Even though I made the video 2 years ago, I get questions. So, I'm making this video because this is what people, the information that people are looking for, and this is my take on it. Now, with any of these old antique cartridges, some of them there is no recourse other than forming brass out of some other case to make it. Okay, and some it can be easily done, and some it cannot. And the one that you really are going to have a problem with is the 43 Spanish. Now, the reason it wasn't a problem back in 2012 is you had 3 sources for ready-made brass that you just took your Lee dies, loaded them, and off to the range you went. Okay, yes, it was a tad bit more expensive back then than buying like 30-06 brass or something like that, but how much of it are you going to make, and how much of it are you going to shoot? Okay, like for me, I have a supply of about 100 cases I accumulated. Okay, and that's back in 2012. Alright, so I don't have a need to buy more brass or to create brass out of something else. Okay, and probably, for all my intents and purposes and my personal use, that's probably a lifetime supply. I doubt very much that I'll be looking for it. So when people approach me, they're going to ask me, hey, how do you form this stuff? And I brought it up. I made another reloading video, and I kind of brought this up. So what I did is I went and I purchased a book, this older book on forming cartridge cases. There's some info in there, but it does not answer the question. Okay, and I spent $60 for this thing. I think this book was in print in 1967. All right, and there is a lot of info in here that I'm personally going to use, but it doesn't have anything to do with this topic. So it was worth it for me to get it. But the 43 Spanish spurred me on. So let's go to availability. Okay, first thing is back in 2012, there were three sources: Bertram brass, Jameson brass, and stuff that is converted from the 348 Winchester centerfire. I have a case here that you can get from Buffalo Arms, and they do a conversion. So everyone says, okay, let's convert to brass like Buffalo Arms does, and I got current prices too, so we'll look at that. Well, since 2012 to now, the only choices you're going to get are Bertram brass, and graphs today I went and looked, they're $68 for a box of 20, which comes out to $2, or comes out to $3.40 a case, okay? But it's dimensionally correct, you just load it, and away you go. The Jameson brass, that company's out of business. It was owned by three different people, I guess, or had three different names over the years. If you go way back, like to the 60s, you will hear Bell Laboratories used in some of these books. Then it was Jameson. Then I think it closed. Jameson closed. Somebody tried reopening it, starting it again under Capstan or something similar. I can't quite remember. And it didn't last long, and now it's done and gone. And they made a lot of these real odd cases. And what I mean by it is the rim thickness on this case, and this is the devil in the details, is like 65 thousandths or 80 thousandths thick. And that's why you really can't get anything like it. Nothing's made with that thick rim thickness that you can form it from something else. And this is where the problem lies, okay, in forming it. And I know there's a lot of questions and people, well, you know, so-and-so does it. And they do it. Buffalo Arms does it. Let me get the exact rim. Yeah, 85 thousandths on the Bertram. And I think Jameson had it a little light at 80 thousandths. And 75 on the Jameson. So, here's the problem. You're not going to find nothing with a 75 thousandths thick rim that's even close. And the case has to be close. You know, your base diameter and diameter of the brass itself, it has to be close to it. And if it's not, then that means you have to turn it, modify it, swage it, or do something to it. So a lot of people are saying, hey, well, how do you convert this 348 brass to the 43 Spanish? Well, first big problem, there's two big problems with this. The rim thickness on the 348 is 60 thousandths. So that's 15, 20 thousandths you got to add to this. And adding to rim thickness is extremely difficult. And see, that's where he brings this up in a book. It's problematic. Now, Donnelly's book, the green one I have on case conversions, he talks about making little washers and dropping them down on there, this little finely machined thing, then putting it on a hot plate and using low temp solder, which is used for like computer boards. And he has a very intricate way of doing this. Well, the time you got to spend machining the little washers and rings, trying to solder it, then you know, in this book it mentions that once you start heating this base up on the case, you could weaken the brass enough to where this stuff will rupture. So this is a tough call on that. You really, it's difficult and really not worth the time. If somebody is making it, yeah, so you're paying $3.40 a case, but guess what? You ain't risking damaging a gun or having a damn rolling block fly out and hit you in the head, get buried in your skull. So, now it becomes, for me to do it, I could try it. I've actually even bought the low temp solder on a project I was thinking about. But really a lot of time, a lot of effort. And if I made it, I'd have to sell you one of these after all the work and hours put into doing it. It'd be $5 a case, just an empty case, okay? To be fair to myself. So, what are we stuck with? Well, right now, and I've heard of people trying to use other things. That's another thing on the forum. I've heard of people trying to use a 4570 and all this other stuff. Or taking, now the second problem with the 348 brass is your base diameter. In other words, this has got a real sharp taper to it. So the base diameter right in front of the rim is 545 thousandths in diameter. Look at, that's a formed one from Buffalo. Okay, Jameson is 515 thousandths right below the rim. That's a big difference. 40 thousandths. Okay, that's not easy to turn off of there. That's not a sandpaper job. Okay, that's swaging or reforming. And Bertram is 520 thousandths, so that's still 25 thousandths take off to get to Bertram's dimension. Now I do have a case formed from 348 Winchester by Buffalo Arms. And what we'll do is we'll kind of come down and take a look at it, and then we'll look at a picture in the book and explain how they did it. So I have to change the camera angle and get closer. And bear in mind, you can buy one of these for $2.79 when they're in stock. They're not in stock right now. Okay, one case. They'll let you buy 1, 2, whatever. Okay, you don't have to buy 20 at a time. And it's $2.79 for one. There's a price for 20, which is like $2.60 something. And if you buy 50 of them, it's $2.51. And you buy 100 of them, it's $2.37 a case. Now bear in mind, this is a Winchester case. I have some Jameson brass in 348 Win that I bought to convert, and Starline makes it now, and the best you're going to get, I think, is $1.27. So $1.27 for the base cartridge and all the work you got to do to it. Getting it for $2.79 is not a bad deal, because there's a lot that has to be done, and it has to be done on a lathe. Okay, if you think you're going to chuck this up in a drill press and file on it, and that filing 40 thousandths off of this take you forever. It'd take you a month to make 20 cartridges. So let's take a look at the problems, and I'll show you how Buffalo Arms did this conversion with a picture here in the book. Alright, using these diagrams in the book, one method is to build the back of the case up, soldering or whatever, and like he says, it's difficult, and then as you see, if you build the back up, you have to build the primer pocket base up where the black is, re-drill it, and then trim it out with an end mill. There's a lot of work into this, and you know, again, you're taking a risk heating it, heating the base of the case and weakening it. Okay, so that is not easy, and I don't recommend it. Nobody does it. Now, the other guy, his method would be the same thing, but instead of doing the back, he would build a rim. Hand shaking like crazy today. Rim and press it down here and build it up, and then solder it on this side, which you wouldn't have to screw with the primer pocket, but then you'd have to put it in a lathe and turn that rim to the right thickness. The way that Buffalo Arms does it is this way here, is you bend the rim down. Okay, he says you can do 4 points or whatever, but the way Buffalo Arms does it is they put the case into a die, swage this rim up, and then they have to cut. In other words, you'll have to make a cut this way into the case to make this uniform, because there's really no way to tell, you know, you can bend it, but then you have to machine it that way to make the rim thickness exact to where you want it. So let's get the camera around and we'll look at the brass itself. Now you got an idea what they're doing. They're bending the rim down, okay, is what they've done. Okay, here's a piece of the Buffalo Arms brass. As you see on the back of this ring, this is where they forced this case up or down into something, and it bent the rim forward, okay? And then you can see this big groove is where they took a lathe parting tool, chucked this up in a lathe, plunged that tool in from the stop, and got the correct rim thickness, which this kind of measures, and you gotta hit it right, because if you just go by the it's about 80 thousandths, 85 thousandths. Okay, then the other problem. So here it is side by side with the case, you know, the parent case. You see the difference, and then the difference there and there. All right, so that was one operation: bend the rim, come in, cut that groove, get this to the proper thickness. Because like I said, this thing here, the actual rim, is only about 60 thousandths, okay, on the parent case. Also, second problem, which makes this is that 545, and on this case, right there in front is almost 510. Okay, so that's 35 thousandths or so they took off of that. So that means this whole case was turned. Now that's an awful lot of work to go through to form this. And that's why it can't really be done without a lathe tooling setup. That however they do this, I don't know if they have a hydraulic press and run this into some kind of fixture or something. It's custom made tooling to do this. So in reality, other than driving yourself crazy or risking damaging your gun or killing yourself, you're probably better off buying this Buffalo Arms formed brass. I'm not even going to attempt this. I did the research, looked into it. I'd have to design something where I put pressure down and fold that rim over. Then I'd have to machine like they did the rim. That's what that big cut in the base is. But then I got to take 30, 40 thousandths off this diameter, okay? Where I can just send them a payment and get the stuff. Okay, so I'm not going to attempt it. I'm not going to try. Okay, and like I said, I have a supply there. So those of you who have questions in this area, I'm making a video to answer your question, and it looks like, you know, buying the brass ready-made is the simplest, easiest thing to do. Trying to get something other than this to work, it can be done, or you can do it without doing the rim deal. Some people say that, and then just turn this to where it fits. And then he does mention that in the book. Once you blow this out, a trick is to just run your sizing die down the neck, okay? And so when it goes into the chamber, it'll be held up against the back breech of the rifle. That way it's not shifting around in the gun, because if you do it with no headspace, when you fire it, the case is going to move back and forth in there. And that will eventually, you can get away with it, but eventually it'll wreck the gun, okay? cause some damage. You could, and somebody mentioned it on one of the forums, just size the neck down and make like a step in it to where it would only go in the chamber and be up flush where it closed. You could try that, but if you notice the shoulder and that, trying to go off the shoulder, it's not that sharp, and those chambers are old and are not really cut like modern chambers. You could try it. Some people try putting like a rubber gasket or washer or something up on here to take up the head space on the rim. But it's rubber, it's going to move. You know, it might hold it in place, but something tells me when you hit it that rubber is going to compress, that cartridge is going to move forward and go off and move backwards. And you're kind of fooling yourself, and all you're doing is exerting high pressure, you know, not to where the gun would blow up in your face, but maybe after 100, 200 rounds, you may have a problem. Something may crack, break, or go. So my advice is get something that's formed. You know, people want to do it themselves. For the amount of money you're saving, like $1 or so, to go through all of that, maybe ruin your gun, maybe hurt yourself, you might as well pay the people that you know, bought the equipment or designed the equipment. That's another thing. I don't know how much money it would cost me to get this stuff set up to do it, you know. So I hope that answers your question and helps people in this problem here with the 43 Spanish about getting the brass. My advice is just buy something ready-made that'll work, and you only got two choices: the stuff converted by Buffalo Arms or Bertram Brass at this point in time. And yes, it's expensive. Okay? So, thanks for watching. Stay tuned.